Well, this is something that you don't see every day. A teenager in West Virginia who was unalived by her boyfriend is now saying that she was only trying to scare him because he made her mad. So let's talk about what happened here. The incident happened just before 10 p.m. on Saturday evening when deputies responded to a 911 call in which the caller advised that his girlfriend had just shot him and that he had been shot multiple times in the chest. When police arrived on the scene, they discovered that there was an altercation that had occurred between two teenagers, a boy and a girl, and that the girl had shot the boy multiple times in the chest and then fled the scene. The victim was transported to the hospital with life-threatening injuries where he remains at this time. Deputies then began their investigation and were able to locate the suspect at a home in Mingo County where she was taken into custody without incident. At the time of this occurring, the victim was in critical condition and it was not known whether or not he was going to make it. And so the girl was charged with malicious assault, which is a felony offense in the state of West Virginia. According to the criminal complaint filed in the case, deputies spoke to the victim at the hospital, and he stated that he had been in a verbal altercation with his girlfriend, the defendant, after he confronted her for cheating on him. The victim told the officers that he got angry, pushed the girl, and that's when she shot him 4 times in the chest before fleeing the scene. He also informed the officers that he and the girl had been dating for the past 6 months and that during their relationship, they had been dealing with some problems. At the time that the alleged shooting took place, the victim had come home from work and had gone to his bedroom where he heard the defendant yelling and screaming. He opened his bedroom door and saw the defendant standing in the living room holding his phone and laughing. The defendant then walked into the bedroom and asked the victim if he wanted to see something funny, to which the victim responded, "What are you talking about?" The defendant then showed the victim a video on her phone depicting her and another boy kissing. The victim immediately confronted the defendant about cheating on him. They began arguing and the victim pushed the defendant. The defendant then ran out of the house and the victim went back to his room. About 30 minutes later, the victim heard gunshots and then he felt pain in his chest. He exited his bedroom and saw the defendant standing in the living room holding a gun. She looked at him and said, "You're going to pay for what you did to me," before fleeing the scene. Okay, so the victim obviously is in critical condition. He has been shot 4 times in the chest, which is obviously very serious. But one thing that the media outlets have failed to mention is that the victim was shot in the chest, not in like the upper chest. You know the heart, you know the upper area, but in the chest, meaning that he was shot in like the front, you know the stomach area. So while being shot in the chest is definitely serious, especially when you're shot multiple times in the chest, it's not necessarily going to be fatal. Now, when the police spoke to the defendant, she admitted to having an altercation with the victim but claimed that it started when the victim came into the kitchen where she was eating dinner and began yelling and screaming at her. She claimed that she and the victim were arguing over the phone when all of a sudden the victim pushed her, causing her to fall backwards and hit her head on the floor. She claims that this is what caused the altercation to get physical, and that's when she shot the victim. So, this is what we know as fact. What we don't know is what the truth really is. Like, what actually happened here? Was the defendant truly cheating on the victim as she has claimed? Did the defendant shoot the victim in self-defense after the victim shoved her and she fell backwards and hit her head on the ground? Or was the defendant simply lying to cover up the fact that she was cheating on the victim and that she shot him in a fit of anger because the victim confronted her about it? We also need to discuss the fact that the defendant, upon hearing that the victim had been shot, fled the scene and left him there to die. Now, obviously, if she did shoot him in self-defense, then she likely fled the scene because she was scared, because she thought that she had killed him, because she didn't want to get caught. But if she shot him on purpose, then that is a red flag that she knew that what she had done was wrong. The big question that needs to be answered here is why the victim was shot in the first place. If the defendant was indeed cheating on the victim, then he had every right to be upset. And if he shoved her, then obviously that's wrong. You can't go around shoving people and hitting them. That's not okay. But her response to this was to pull out a gun and shoot him 4 times in the chest. That is not okay. There is never an excuse to pull out a gun and shoot somebody. The good news is that it does not appear that the defendant shot the victim in the head or the upper chest. So hopefully, when he gets out of the hospital, he will make a full recovery. But this is still a very serious matter and should absolutely be treated as such. Now, I don't know the specifics of West Virginia law, but in most jurisdictions, if you are a minor and you commit a crime, then you are typically charged as a juvenile and your records are sealed. However, malicious assault is a very serious crime and it could be charged as an adult crime, which means that the defendant in this case would have her entire life ahead of her ruined if convicted. So that is something that she is facing. She has not yet been charged as an adult, but given the seriousness of the allegations against her, it wouldn't surprise me if she was eventually charged as an adult. In addition to that, West Virginia is a one-strike state when it comes to violent crimes, meaning that even if the victim in this case does survive, the defendant could be facing life in prison without the possibility of parole if the state decides to charge her as an adult. This is a very sad situation. We hope that the victim makes a full recovery. But this goes to show how important it is to not tolerate violence. It is never the answer and it will always have consequences. Now, since we don't know all of the facts surrounding this case, I'm not going to say that what the defendant did was justified. However, I do think that there are cases where a woman may reasonably fear for her safety when she is in the presence of a man. Men can be very dangerous, and oftentimes when a man becomes enraged, they become physical. So sometimes a woman may reasonably fear for her safety in these situations. However, the key word there is fear. It must be a reasonable fear based on the totality of the circumstances. And in this particular case, the totality of the circumstances do not support the fact that this woman reasonably feared for her safety. That being said, it doesn't justify what she did here, because what she did was completely uncalled for. Instead of running away, instead of calling the cops, she pulled out a gun and shot him multiple times in the chest. That is absolutely insane. However, I don't know the specifics of West Virginia law. And under West Virginia law, it appears that a person can be charged with murder if they cause the death of another with a firearm while committing a felony. So it looks like the state can charge the defendant with murder here, even if they cannot prove malice aforethought, which is usually what is required to convict somebody of murder. We will be keeping up with this case, and if any more information comes out, I will bring it to you guys as soon as possible. Also, if you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment and subscribe. You guys are directly impacting these videos, impacting this channel and helping me to reach and educate more people than I could ever do on my own.